The candle's small, flickering flame cast long, restless shadows that danced across the walls lined with towering shelves, each packed with tomes that seemed alive in their silent mutability. Before her lay the cipher, pages yellowed and fragile, yet pulsing with a strange vitality, as if the ink itself breathed with a secret will. Her fingers traced the cryptic symbols that had become both her obsession and her curse, each line presenting a riddle, each phrase a whisper from a future yet unwritten, or perhaps already written and waiting to be revealed. The silence around her was thick but never empty. It hummed with the subtle shifts of the books, the faint rustle of unseen pages turning, rewriting, rearranging their own stories in ways that defied reason. Ilara's mind raced, tangled in the relentless tension between the cipher's cold prophecies and the flickering hope that she might somehow bend the narrative to her will. The latest revelation chilled her. The cipher did not merely predict crimes, it tethered them to an unyielding fate, as if the future were carved in stone, and she was destined to play her part. Her breath caught when she reread the passage that pointed directly to her own death, the final crime foretold. The words felt like chains tightening round her soul. Yet, beneath the dread, a stubborn ember of defiance ignited. She would not be a passive victim of this story. If the books could rewrite their pasts and futures, then perhaps she could rewrite hers too. The soft click of footsteps drew her attention. Mina Solis appeared, her auburn curls catching the dim light, eyes bright with concern and determination. "Ilara," she whispered, sliding into the seat across from her, "we have to talk. This isn't just about predictions anymore. It's about control, about whether we let the story end or change it." Ilara nodded, grateful for the presence of her steadfast friend. "I've been thinking the same, but how? The cipher feels like a chain, binding everything to a predetermined outcome. What if fate is stronger than our will?" Mina's voice dropped to a fierce whisper. "Then we break the chain. We fight the story it's trying to tell us." Their conversation swirled around the library's ancient stones, a mix of skepticism and hope. They debated the nature of fate as the stained glass windows filtered the dying light into fractured colors, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the worn floor. The library itself seemed to lean in, listening. Before Ilara could respond, a tall figure emerged from the shadows, Professor Alden Gray. His silver hair and piercing blue eyes gave him the appearance of a spectral guardian of forbidden knowledge. He approached slowly, his voice low but firm. "Beware the temptation to rewrite what is already written," he warned. "The narrative you challenge is older and deeper than you realize. Defiance comes at a price." Ilara met his gaze, the weight of his words settling like a cold fog. "I understand the risks, Professor, but I cannot accept a future where I am powerless." Gray's eyes softened for a moment. "Then prepare yourself. The path you choose is fraught with shadows." As the professor retreated into the labyrinth of bookshelves, Ilara felt the gravity of her decision pulling her toward the grand staircase that spiraled down into the heart of the library. She paused at the top, looking down into the dim expanse of endless knowledge and secrets. The interplay of light and shadow mirrored the crossroads within her, a choice between surrendering to the invisible forces, shaping her fate, or stepping boldly into the unknown to forge a new path. The library held its breath as Ilara made her choice. With a steadying breath, she descended the stairs, each step a declaration of war against the deterministic cycle. Her mind sharpened, resolve hardening like tempered steel. She would become the author of her own story, no matter the cost. Yet, as the shadows lengthened and the ancient walls whispered warnings, a question lingered in the air. Was the narrative truly hers to rewrite, or was she merely a character trapped within a story penned by forces beyond comprehension? The answer would come soon enough, but for now, Alara clung to the fragile hope that free will could triumph over fate. The candle flickered once more, its light steadying as if in quiet solidarity. The shifting pages awaited her next move. The crossroads had been reached, and the story was poised on the edge of change. Alara Whitlock sat hunched over a cluttered table, the frayed edges of ancient manuscripts spilling over from beneath a glowing laptop screen. Beside her, Mina Solis tapped rapidly on the keyboard, her curly auburn hair falling into her eyes as she scrolled through encrypted digital archives. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and dust, the dim light casting long shadows that danced like phantoms across the cracked stone walls. "Look at this," Mina whispered, nudging the screen toward Alara. "Patterns in the cipher, they're repeating in cycles. Almost like the cults trying to trap us in a loop." Alara's round glasses caught the pale light as she leaned in, her fingers tracing the cryptic symbols. "If we can crack the pattern, maybe we can predict their next move, or better yet, rewrite it." Mina's eyes shone with fierce determination. "And we won't do it alone. We need allies." The idea was daunting, yet necessary. The Ivory cult's reach was vast, and Elara's isolation had bred a growing paranoia that gnawed at her resolve. But Mina's unyielding loyalty was a lifeline, a beacon cutting through the shadowy maze of deception. Days passed in feverish collaboration. Alara cautiously recruited a handful of trusted students, those who had shown cracks in their skepticism or whispered doubts about the university's opaque authorities. Meetings were held in secret, an empty lecture hall cloaked in darkness, the echo of whispered conversations bouncing off cold stone. Strategies were drawn, cipher fragments shared, and trust slowly stitched together in the fragile fabric of their alliance. Yet, it was the moment she stepped into Professor Alden Gray's office that the weight of their endeavor truly settled upon her shoulders. The room was a sanctuary of aged books and dim lamplight, the scent of leather and ink thick in the air. Gray sat behind his desk, his silver hair catching the faint light, eyes sharp and unreadable. "Alara," he began, voiced low and lined with urgency. "The Ivory cult is more than an academic curiosity. They believe in the inevitability of destiny control through predetermination, but their certainty is also their weakness." He slid a brittle parchment across the desk, its surface marked by cryptic symbols and fragmented text. "This is a fragment of their creed, recently uncovered. It points to a final plan, one that will seal the fate they have written for you." Alara felt a shiver course down her spine. Can it be stopped? Gray's gaze softened, but the weight of his knowledge was palpable. "That depends on whether you can rewrite the narrative before the last page is sealed." Leaving his office, Alara's mind raced. The cult's influence tightened like a noose, yet now she had a plan and allies. Back in the library's shadowed corners, the group worked tirelessly, piecing together the cipher's secrets by day and guarding their fragile trust by night. In the stillness after midnight, Alara often found herself alone in the library's main reading room. Moonlight spilled through the cracked stained glass windows, casting fractured colors onto the worn wooden tables. The shifting pages of her open book fluttered softly, as if alive, embodying the uncertainty of the path ahead. She pressed her palm to the cool surface of the table, drawing strength from the silent allies who now stood with her. The battle for control over the story was far from over, but for the first time, hope flickered beneath the looming dread. As the shadows lengthened and the library whispered its ancient secrets, Alara whispered back, "We will rewrite this ending." Outside, the night held its breath. The air grew colder, heavier with the scent of dust, and something older, the musk of forgotten centuries, sealed away from the sun and prying eyes. Her heart thrummed, equal parts excitement and dread. This was the threshold she had been chasing since the cipher first whispered its secrets to her in the shifting pages. At the bottom, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber, its walls lined with shelves groaning under the weight of manuscripts older than the university itself. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows over cracked leather bindings and brittle parchment. Some manuscripts, sealed with wax emblems, she recognized from her research: the ivory mask, the cryptic sigils of the cult. Professor Alden Gray was already there, his tall, gaunt frame leaning against a massive wooden desk intricately carved with symbols that seemed to writhe beneath the candlelight. His silver hair caught the glow, and his piercing blue eyes reflected the urgency in his voice as he beckoned her closer. "This," he said, his fingers tracing a spiral pattern etched into the desk, "is the heart of the library's secret. These texts are not mere records, they are instruments. The Ivory cult discovered long ago how to manipulate time itself, not by physical means, but by rewriting narrative, history, fate, reality, all our stories that can be edited." Alara swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her like a shroud. She reached out, gingerly opening one fragile manuscript. The script was faded but unmistakably ancient, a blend of cryptic ciphers and poetic incantations. The margins were filled with annotations, notes from cult members, scholars who had devoted their lives to this dangerous power. As she traced the ink with trembling fingers, the room seemed to pulse with a quiet power, a subtle shifting that echoed the very phenomenon she had witnessed in the library's upper halls. The books were alive, not in the simple sense of changing text, but as vessels of time's fluidity, bending the future and past in a dance orchestrated by the cult. A sudden movement at the chamber's entrance drew her attention. Librarian Marlowe appeared, his shadowed face inscrutable in the dim light. His eyes met hers with a silent warning, a reminder that some doors, once opened, could not be closed. "You tread on dangerous ground, Alara." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "The library watches, and not all who guard its secrets are friends." Alara nodded, the fragile manuscript pressed to her chest like a talisman. The knowledge she had uncovered was a double-edged sword, the key to breaking the cycle, but also a beacon that would draw the cult's gaze ever closer. Professor Gray stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "We must tread carefully. Every revelation brings us closer to the truth and to the edge of the abyss." In that hidden chamber, beneath the shifting narratives of the university library, Alara felt the true weight of the battle ahead. The past was no longer a fixed point, the future no longer certain. Time was a story, and she held the pen. As the candle flames flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for her, Alara steeled herself. The Ivory cult's grip on history was ancient and powerful, but so too was her determination to rewrite the final page. Outside, the distant rumble of an approaching storm echoed the turmoil within, the night thick with possibility and peril. And somewhere in the depths of the library's heart, the story was waiting to be changed. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, Alara felt a fragile hope stirring amidst the shadows. The final word hung in the air, a silent promise. The narrative was unbound, but the outcome was hers to shape. The last page was not yet written, and with that, the chapter closed, but the story was only beginning. She had returned to the restricted section, drawn by an unsettling curiosity that had taken root ever since she first noticed the books rewriting themselves. Tonight, the air was thick with dust motes that danced faintly in the golden pools of lamplight. the faint scent of aged paper and binding glue mingling with the cool, damp stone walls. Her fingers traced the fragile pages with reverence, stopping abruptly as she encountered something she had never seen before. Entire sections of text were missing, not torn or damaged, but blank, smooth, featureless stretches of white that seemed to shimmer faintly when caught in the lamplight. The margins around them remained detailed and crisp, the handwriting of long-dead scribes continuing up to the edges of these voids as if hesitant to cross the invisible boundary. Ilara blinked and rubbed her eyes, convinced at first that exhaustion was to blame. But when she looked again, the blank spaces seemed to pulse subtly, shifting in shape and size as if alive. Her breath caught. She lifted her round glasses and peered closer, a low hum of excitement and dread rising in her chest. "Mina," she whispered urgently into her phone, the soft crackle of the call barely audible. "You need to come. I've found something different." Minutes later, Mina arrived, her short curls catching the lamplight, her eyes wide with concern and anticipation. She approached quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile tranquility of the ancient chamber. "What is it?" Mina asked in a hushed tone. Ilara pointed at the blank passages. "Look, these aren't just missing pages. They're gaps, spaces where the story hasn't been written yet. I think they represent future events, things that haven't happened or been decided." Mina leaned in, fingertips tracing the edges of the voids cautiously. "You mean the books are waiting?" "Exactly. They're dynamic, changing with time and choice. If the books rewrite past events, these blank pages might be the space where the future can still be shaped." The idea sent a thrill through them both, but beneath that, a cold thread of fear tightened in Ilara's stomach. If the future was unwritten, then her own faith, the death the cipher had predicted, might still be avoided or rewritten. But how? Their whispered conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Professor Alden Grey, who emerged from the shadows like a spectre. His silver hair caught the light, and his piercing blue eyes fixed on the open tome. "Treading into forbidden waters, Ilara," he said quietly, voice grave. "The unwritten pages are not merely gaps. They are the library's deepest secret. To meddle with them is to challenge the flow of time itself." Ilara met his gaze steadily. "If the future can be changed, isn't it worth the risk?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but be warned, the deeper you go, the more you risk losing yourself to the shifting narratives. The library does not forgive easily." As Grey's footsteps faded into the recesses of the library, Ilara closed the tome with a decisive thud. Her heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear. The story was not yet complete. And now, more than ever, she was determined to be the one to write the ending. Outside, the ancient walls seemed to pulse with quiet anticipation, the line between past, present, and future blurring in the dim light. Somewhere in the depths of the library, the ivory masks of the cult watched silently, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Ilara's fingers traced the blank page one last time before she slipped the book carefully into her bag. The unwritten pages beckoned, and she was ready to face whatever story awaited her pen. The library's secrets were vast, but so was her resolve. The narrative was hers, to shape or shatter. With a final glance at the flickering lamps, Ilara stepped into the shadows, the promise of the unwritten future weighing heavily in her mind. She had discovered the void, but could she fill it in time? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the library whispered its ancient, shifting tale. Ilara Whitlock sat hunched at a narrow wooden table, her round glasses catching the fading light from a solitary desk lamp. Around her, the shelves loomed like ancient sentinels, their tomes whispering faintly as if alive with the stories they contained and concealed. The scent of old parchment, ink, and the faint musk of mildew clung to the air, mingling with Elaro's quickened breath as she pored over a tangle of handwritten notes and scanned documents. Each page seemed to pulse with hidden meaning, a cipher within a cipher, waiting for her to unravel its threads. Her fingers trembled slightly as she cross-referenced the marginalia in a crumbling manuscript. With the digital archives Mina had helped her access, the faint glow of the screen illuminated her intense eyes, shadowed beneath the frames of her glasses. She had uncovered names that appeared innocuous at first glance, but took on a sinister weight when linked to the cryptic symbols and subtle alterations in the rewriting books. Faculty members she had once admired, students she had passed in the hallways, even the elusive librarian, Marlawall, bore the marks of the Ivory cult's infiltration. A sudden noise startled her. Faint shuffle echoed from the corridor outside the restricted section. Ilara froze, heart hammering, every nerve alert. The library, usually a sanctuary of silence, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and whispered threats. Gathering her notes, she slipped the papers into her satchel and moved swiftly but quietly through the narrow aisles, her footsteps muffled by thick rugs. The library's vastness stretched endlessly. A maze she had come to know intimately yet now seemed to shift unpredictably around her. Later that evening, in the cavernous main hall, Ilara met with Professor Alden Grey beneath the towering arches and stained glass windows that cast fractured patterns of fading light upon the marble floor. His gaunt figure, framed by silver hair and piercing blue eyes, was a stark contrast against the gloom. Their conversation was cautious, laden with unspoken meanings and careful probing. "You tread a perilous path, Ilara," Grey murmured, his voice low and grave. "The roots of this cult run deeper than you imagine, entwining with those sworn to guard knowledge. Trust is a scarce commodity here." Ilara's gaze hardened. "I have to know who is behind this. If the rewriting books are controlled by them, then every story, every truth is at their mercy." Grey's eyes flickered with a shadow of regret. "Beware that your search does not consume you. The line between enemy and ally blurs in these halls." After the meeting, Ilara found solace in the company of Mina Solis, whose spirited loyalty and sharp mind offered a counterbalance to the growing suspicion that gnawed at her. In a quiet corner of the library, the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across their faces as Mina shared the latest breakthroughs from the digital archives. "Look here," Mina whispered, pointing to a series of encrypted emails and surveillance logs. "These aren't just random students. They're organized, communicating in code. The cult's reach is far beyond what we feared." Ilara's pulse quickened. "We need to expose them before it's too late. But who can we trust?" Mina's eyes glinted with determination. "We trust each other, for now." Yet, as the days passed, the invisible web of deceit tightened like a noose. Ilara felt eyes on her constantly, whispers trailing her footsteps, and once familiar faces now seemed masks, hiding darker intentions. The library's labyrinthine corridors, once a source of wonder, transformed into a gauntlet of suspicion and dread. One night, Ilara walked alone beneath the towering shelves, the distant creaks of shifting wood and rustling pages echoing like ghostly footsteps. The shadows seemed to twist and lengthen, the weight of isolation pressing down. Her thoughts spiraled. Could she break free from the cult's grasp, or was she destined to become another thread woven into their relentless tapestry? The chapter closed on Ilara's resolute vow, whispered to the silent stacks, "I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost." And as the library held its breath, The shifting narratives awaited the next move in a game where trust was the most fragile and dangerous currency.